He acknowledged that, saying at the time, it was the right plan. She then asked what had changed. He replied that it changed because it had been fun. Fun to go for the surface with them, to share meals together. It had been nice to introduce themselves and grow closer with each passing woman. He realized that the dreams he had back in the basement were even better than he'd imagined. But all of it ended when people died. When someone died, they could no longer talk, share names, or connect. He remembered Geon extending his hand for friendship and how now that would never happen. He recalled the time in the basement when a woman asked him if he'd ever felt sadness from losing someone precious. At the time, he hadn't understood what she meant. But now he was beginning to comprehend. That's why he wanted Haru to run. He didn't want to see anyone else die. Standing there, Haru stared at him, the bodies of Yujin and Gen lying in pools of blood. She dropped the wooden stick she'd been holding and began to break down. Once again, she was in the same situation. Shadows of monsters rushed past, just like the day she abandoned her father. And just like that day, Blue turned to her and told her to run. She asked herself why. Why were they saying the same thing? She screamed, no. She had decided she wouldn't run away alone anymore. She didn't want to keep living, haunted by the memory of that moment. The moment she abandoned her father, she was terrified even thinking about the way he had looked at her. Her father had been the only one who truly understood her, telling her it was okay to be a coward and that it wasn't her fault. But she abandoned him anyway. That's why she was so scared. Haru was consumed by fear, afraid her father might have hated her in his final moments. The protagonist laughed and said he knew it. She was the kind of person who liked to lose. Haru stood still as shadows rushed past her and the protagonist smiled just like her father had. That's where she realized even in his last moments, she was certain her father still loved her. She remembered when he held out his pinky and told her she wouldn't cry anymore. Whenever she thought of herself as a coward, she extended her pinky, saying she understood. They locked pinkies and she was enveloped in shadows. Blue stood motionless. Amid the darkness, Haru asked, "Didn't I already tell you?" But he insisted again, telling her to retreat, reminding her he had already warned her. Everything would be over if she died and he didn't want to see anyone else die. But she continued moving forward and asked, "Who said I'm going to die?" She declared she would survive no matter what. She threw a can of gasoline to the ground, smashing it under her foot. She said she'd keep living, sharing conversations with him and calling each other by their names. The protagonist had no idea what she was doing. Then she pulled out a lighter and said, "This is how we'll become friends." When she lit it, the creatures turned their attention to her. He asked what she thought she was doing. But she simply replied, "Don't give up. Yet to keep living, no matter what." She dropped the lighter, saying she'd always run to save herself. But from this moment on, she was going to run for others. With her feet engulfed in flames, the creatures began closing in as she shouted back, "I'll see you at the base." Blue still had moved as the swarm of monsters charged after her. Harbor fluid, leaving a trail of flame in footprints. At first, the creatures were far behind, but they quickly gained ground until one was about to reach her. She dodged the first attack, slid to the side, flipped out of the path of another and began climbing a rock. She reached the top, but more monsters were waiting below. With no other option, she leaped from the top of the rock. She was flying now. That's when the monstrous female began moving toward her. But Blue stepped in her way, asking, "And where do you think you're going?" He told her, "Your opponent is me." The two stood facing each other. Despite his words, Blue knew how strong she was. This was unlike anything he had faced before. It could feel the energy radiating from her cores, teeming with life, more powerful than any of the others. Still coughing up blood, he had no idea how he would win. He spotted one attack stake on the ground and sprinted toward it, but she kicked it away before he could reach it. The impact sent pain shooting through his body as she stomped the ground, sending him flying. He realized she was guarding the weapon, proving her intelligence. She knew it was dangerous for him to have it. Without it, he couldn't target her weak points. That's when he remembered what his father had said. Weapons weren't necessary for people like them. You'll understand one day, his father had told him. Blue met no idea what that meant. But his father had smiled and said, even without weapons were the strongest. He recalled that he'd never seen his father wield a weapon. As the creature slowly approached, he adopted his stance as father had taught him. The strongest stance, he had said, designed to prepare him for anything. His father had explained that every being carried life energy. Humans on the surface, beasts, plants, and even him and his son. Everything in the world used this power. His hand needed to act as the focal point for this life energy. He had to focus entirely on the tips of his fingers, channeling his inner energy there. Once he felt its presence, he had to learn to control it. Blue had been confused, telling his father he felt nothing. What is this life energy nonsense? He had asked. His father had reassured him, saying, you might not understand now, but one day, you'll meet it. In the present, Blue assumed the stance. He began to sense how each creature used their life energy. Gradually, he found his own within himself. The energy began flowing through his body and he remembered his father's words. When this happens, the power is yours. Blue felt a strange, warm sensation. As if his entire body were on fire. He recalled asking his father what would change when he used his power. His father had answered, you'll be able to move to just a little. A tiny bit, almost like how I move. The female monster was now right behind him. Suddenly, he turned, delivering a punch directly into her arm and abdomen. Blue's punch struck deep into the creature, sending it hurling backward. The monster was dragged along the ground, trembling. Even though it had no eyes, it was clear that the damn thing was surprised. The protagonist was finally able to see every movement of the creature. His body was now fast enough to react to all of it. Even the slightest movement of a rock nearby was noticeable. It felt as if everything around them had slowed down. The problem was that it hurt like hell. His entire body felt like it was burning and his blood vessels were on fire. But at least now, he was sure. He could fight her head on. The creature prepared itself and charged at him again. Blue focused once more and managed to dodge the kick. What he quickly realized, there was another one following right after. He tried to block it with his arm, but she grabbed him instead. She swung him through the air and threw him far away. Mid-air, he managed to adjust himself, but she still reached him in time to land another kick. He was launched backward. And just as he hit the ground, she advanced again. He dodged the first strike, the second, and a flurry of punches. He noticed her leg looked exposed and went for a kick to her heel, knocking her off balance. This gave him an opening to land a punch right into her ribs, dragging her entire body along the ground. Once again, the female monster was thrown far away. He wondered if this had been enough to cause any real damage. The monster paused for a moment staring at him. It placed its hands over its abdomen. That's when he realized she was starting to protect her weak points. Now he knew this power wasn't enough. He needed even more strength to reach her core. At least now, he had the answer to how he could get it. He raised his arm again, telling himself he needed more. His body continued to burn as he pushed for more power. Remembering Jien's and Eugen's deaths, he knew this wasn't enough. He needed more power. No, he needed this power before everything had happened. The energy flowing through his body seemed to increase. After enduring a pain for a while, he focused and his eyes glowed blue. He paused, lowered his head and took a deep breath. Then he opened his eyes and told her to come at him. More and more arms began sprouting from the monster's back. She glared at him for a moment before charging an end with explosive speed. But no matter how fast she was blue, he was able to see her attacks now. He told himself that all he needed was to be stronger. As he opened his fists, several seeds fell to the ground. He had torn a hole through the creature. As she began to disintegrate, he muttered that if he had been stronger, no one would have been hurt. But that attack came at a cost and collapsed to the ground in excruciating pain.